Hello, Janis. Welcome to the Builder Mind podcast.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, very nice to have you. So I know you for 2 years, but I never thought that you studied physics and other technical subjects in your master's and bachelor's, and you did lots of sales jobs before Trace. So maybe we can start from how did you end up from world of technicalities to the world of sales?
Yeah, like all of the people that don't know where they will end up, they end up in sales. Even I was actually in quite a good high school in Latvia, and it was technically minded high school with lots of exact sciences, physics, mathematics, chemistry. I just never felt particularly drawn to any specific subject, although I did enjoy all of them. And I had in high school a really good physics teacher. And since I didn't want to do something that's not exactly like scientific, and I didn't want to go into law or communication science or anything like that, I chose physics as my as my bachelor's after high school because I thought it's just going to be interesting. It's going to give me some ideas how the world works, teach me to think analytically without any specific reason to go into physics as a career or discipline. And that actually all came to be true. I really enjoyed the studies of physics. It's a gift and a curse because now you just understand how the whole world works, but also it just takes a little bit the magic out some of the times because you see something and you just know how things work. But it was a good time. I really enjoyed it. And after bachelor's, I had a choice. I had to choose what to do, and I always wanted to see the world and where I come from the outside perspective. And so I chose a master in Amsterdam. It was called Business and Entrepreneurship in Health and Life Sciences. So it was a little bit of policy if you went into like health policy, public health, and it was also a little bit of sort of management if you wanted to go into healthcare management, like managing a hospital or a medical institution. And it was quite research focused. So it was good to some degree, but it was definitely not what I wanted to do. And especially because it was focused on the local, like a Dutch market. And already while doing the first master in Amsterdam, I applied and got into a second master at the same time. It was called Business Information Systems. And that was actually where things got more interesting because it was very applicable to real life. So we had courses in business analysis, in philosophy, in data analysis, in data visualization. So some very technical things like coding, how do you represent data and analyzing that data. But also we had guest lectures from people from banks, from government, that are actually building large IT systems. And that's how I actually really enjoyed that master. I was doing really well. I was actually quite close to cum laude. I think I missed one exam because I had to travel for my sister's child baptism or something like that. And so I missed an exam and then I couldn't pass it right away. But overall, I really enjoyed both the master, my time in Amsterdam back then, and it also gave me real life look at what the business world is like, which is quite rare for academia. Oftentimes it's very theoretical and then you go into the real world and realize actually nothing's working like that. And that's when I needed to write a master's thesis, and my current co-founder, Carlos, and actually a classmate from my high school, he was working for a Latvian IT consultancy firm, and we were doing a project, or they were doing a project where they were helping the Latvian State Revenue Service restructure how they analyze change requests for all their information systems. It's more than 20. It's quite complex stuff. And so I joined that project as a business analyst, where I applied my academia knowledge on business analysis, business process management directly on a real world project. And so we reorganized some of the change management process. And during that time, I also got to know a company called Jama software, where they are actually doing requirements, and so we were implementing that tool for managing those change requests as requirements in that project, and actually led me to being hired as their first European employee. And I really, when I went to see them in Portland, Oregon, I realized that startups is where I want to be, not the consultancy that supports the government in some way. I saw Portland, I saw the startup vibe, and I was like, I need to get in there. And it's quite funny, but in some ways I just didn't care in what shape or form. And even though I had quite technical background, they were opening an office in Amsterdam back at the end of 2016, and I just joined them as a junior sales development. Basically, whatever role they had, I joined as their first European employee, and that's how I got into sales. It was just I wanted to join the world of startups, and that was the only available position in Europe for them, and yeah, and so that's how I got into sales. To answer your question in a bit of a long form.
Very interesting. And I saw that you have done very good, in terms of sales, and you joined Lokalize later before starting Trace. So maybe we can start about Trace. Is like, what was the moment when you guys really kind of start thinking about it, and then thought, okay, let's just build something around this requirement management space?
Yeah, maybe just to take a step back, because I think this all leads to the logical place. So when I joined Jama in Amsterdam, I had a chance to work with execs and founders of the company and the early executives of the company. And so even though I was relatively junior in my tech career, I had a technical background. So my career progression was very fast. One, because I was exposed to senior level execs, American, West Coast sales style. We went on sites to customers, and I saw how they do it, and I was just soaking the information in really quickly. So I was just basically getting promoted every 6 months and learning how to do enterprise sales. And in that, at some point, because I was growing so fast in my career, I was just getting frustrated with, being far away from headquarters. You're not really into the sort of the core of where the things are happening.
Main
And so,
circle.
yeah, exactly. And so my old friend and classmate from very early years, Mikos, joined a small Latvian startup called Lokalize back at the end of 2019, and we were talking about it, and they sounded very relevant because I knew the sort of West Coast style American sales from my Jama experience, and they sounded like they're doing all the right things, and so that's when I sort of seeked out a meeting with the founders of Lokalize. I just wanted to learn what they do and how they do it, and they were about 20-25 people at the time, very early in terms of like scaling go to market. So everything was sort of founder led or product led sales up until that point, and they were growing quite fast. Good product, good team, good founders. My friend Mikos was there, and so I made the jump at the beginning of 2020 as their first sales leader. And so there were, at the time, it was just early steps of building a scalable machine, and founders were making all good decisions. They were hiring young, hungry execs with some already international experience, and I always wanted to help scale a Latvian startup. And so I moved over to Riga from Amsterdam, and we had a little office there, and I joined them as their first head of sales. And that's when things got really interesting, because so we started hiring first few people. I started implementing a sales playbook, something more predictable, more scalable, and the COVID hit. So I had half of my team just onboarding, And at the time, I was a first-time manager. Because of the COVID, everyone moving remote and all the availability of capital at the time, the tech was going through this crazy boom. And one of the ways you could grow is by localizing, by translating your software. And so we just had a really good time in Lokalize. It was the right moment, the right team, and we just rapidly grew the revenue, rapidly grew the team, went through cycles and cycles of personal and professional growth and company growth. So it was a beautiful time, but at the same time, it was also just extremely demanding. So you're a young exec. You have to continuously learn new things every day, and things keep changing every day. And because the company is growing so fast, you have to almost scale yourself as fast as the company. And Mikos and I, we were always talking like, how are we putting all this effort into building this company? And yes, it's rewarding, but we could be putting all this effort into our own company. And so this discussion was going on for a really long time. And in the meantime, I kept catching up with my old friend Carlos. And at some point, well, I was always telling him that we could build sort of the future engineering tool. And because we both knew the industry, the space, it's all outdated tooling. And I just saw in Lokalize it's possible to build better tools. And then at some point, I think at the time when Nordigen was exiting to go cardless, Carlos spoke to one of their founders, and he was also like, wow, these guys just are, as smart as I am, but they are exiting, and I'm here grinding in this consultancy. And so we all had similar mindset. We just thought, well, let's just try to build something ourselves. And that's how we got into building Trace.Space is first we knew the industry. We were frustrated that we are putting all the effort in, but not building anything for ourselves. And we had both the business and the technical acumen to actually build something. And also a little bit of experience already in scaling and VC, because Lokalize was going through multiple funding rounds at this time. And yeah, we started talking about Trace.Space about 2.5 years ago, seriously. And then we started interviewing potential customers, whether this is a real problem. And then we raised our pre-seed, I think about exactly 2 years ago now.
Yeah, 2 years ago. I remember. So, I mean, were you guys starting right away with the exact idea that you have now? Or were you thinking of some other ideas and then switch to this after the customer interview or after more findings?
So we had a broad idea. The whole world of Western manufacturing is going through a profound transformation. So what used to be electromechanical parts of hardware put into a device is now software defined. So it has lots of software in it. You can send over there updates, and you also now expect autonomy, especially in the age of AI. You want those devices to drive themselves, or you can do crazy things in medical, like remote surgeries and maybe autonomous surgeries for some things. And actually that has a profound impact on how products are built, because now hardware, mechanical and electrical, and they also need a software team integrated. And so there is tooling for building these products. The industry is called requirements management or systems engineering, but it's all built either 90s, early 2000s. So it's full of old tools. So, and you're going through this profound transformation where everything's getting more complex and you have to speed up development. But at the same time, you're using tools and processes from 20, 30 years ago. And so what we did first, we started talking to the practitioners in this space from Carlos and mine network. And we asked them what are the problems that they're facing without actually specifying what are we asking about. And all of them talk about issues in the hardware software development cycle. So how do you make sure that what you're building actually is predictably good? And so then you need to apply the principles of systems engineering to actually get these devices to the market, because you have to also remember that's regulated environment. It's not just, meta glasses that could break, but they're not going to really kill anybody. So you want a high quality product, but it also has to be safe. And so there's a lot of rigor that goes into building complex products. And so what we realized is that there's never been a requirements tool built from the ground up with this mindset that software is a deep part of the software of product development. And at the time, we were, even before ChatGPT, we were integrating the early sort of API from OpenAI to see how it applies to that. And so we have a tool now that can actually start helping engineers do their job, which was just never possible before. And so I would say that the problem is known and the space is known. And to answer your question, building in the space and for the industry and for the specific problem that we discovered from the beginning, but actually the solutions that you need to come up with, they are sometimes novel because nobody's ever done this before like that.
So if I can just like repeat what you're saying is that, so in the past, first people were producing the hardware and then they were bringing the software to it. But now what they do is that they take the software and hardware as same, and then they kind of work together in parallel because you're building the hardware for the software and then the software for the hardware. So you have to kind of consider both kind of like the aspects so that you will have a much more enabled hardware.
Yeah.
Is it true? Okay.
Yeah, it's about right. I would just add that because of software, there's just a lot more iterations. It's just a lot more data, lot more iterations of your development process, a lot more testing, and it just because of all of that, you need to get more people involved. It's just a lot more data, and you keep updating it. And so the existing tooling was never built for that amount of data, that many people involved, and that many changes in the process. In the past, you could just write a requirements document, fix it in time. Now you have to become more agile. And so that actually brings another level of complexity.
Mm-hmm. I think now it's becoming more software than hardware because you really need to kind of build a software. Then like it learns from the data, especially in then like autonomous driving or like robotics. And I can say that it's actually the golden time of building something in this between this space, like hardware and software, because of AI.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it is a really good time to build in this space. And there are actually, we see in the past 2 years, quite a few companies have come up in this in related disciplines. I just wanted to say that the physics still apply, and that's what makes it very complex. There is the world of software which is like a black box. You don't know exactly what kind of signals, what kind of APIs there are to connect to devices, but you also still have to do it in the physical realm, and you still have to, consider all the, physics around it, and then yeah, it's actually mind blowing what people and companies have been able to do. But also you see companies failing in this space. You see GM just closed Cruise after investing billions of dollars. Volkswagen invested up to 15 billion in Cariad, which to build their software-defined infotainment system, operating system for the car, and still kind of failed because now they're buying Rivian to get access to their software-defined zonal architecture. So you see, there are problems in this space because of the insane complexity and speed that you need and rigor that you need.
Yeah, I think like you have always like remember the first principles of physics, and then also like try to be mindful of the limitations, and then like see how flexible could be the software. And I think it takes a lot of time, yeah, because you work with two-sided game, and then you can, and that's the thing is that so many companies are either good in hardware or software, and then like there are a few of them which are good in both. So maybe like we can click down on Trace.Space more, and if you can do a quick pitch, like what exactly it is, and then who are the main customers and what type of value are you pushing for, like the main value propositions.
Yeah. So Trace.Space is a new type of requirements management tool, and it's specifically built for companies building software-defined products that can be in automotive space, in medical, semiconductor, industrial products, and also eventually will go into aerospace and defense. And there are companies in the world that use requirements management for consumer hardware. So we're speaking to them as well. But our first market has been automotive because they are having these competitive pressures, existential crisis on how to actually move forward when you have this extremely complex new thing that you need to build, and you have pressures from China that are also doing really well in this aspect. And what makes us different is that we've thought from the ground up to how to actually help the engineers do their job by integrating AI deeply into the architecture. So the tool actually helps the engineers while they do their job. And also, because of the amount of data and change, we also thought through the architecture from the ground up how to support millions of requirements and tens of millions in the future without any performance issues, and also how to help the software people integrate this tool into their development. So we already have integrations into Jira and GitHub, but also we have by far the best API in the engineering space. So you can actually automate and script anything you want on the API side, which is maybe standard for SaaS companies and tech companies, but actually in the engineering space, it's quite rare. And that basically helping to manage complexity is we're basically making individual engineers more productive, but also we let them spot issues much earlier in the cycles. We bring a lot of value in not having to do rework late in the project, and making sure that the quality is predictably high.
Okay, great. Maybe we can have the live demo now.
Yeah, sure. So if you look at the screen right now, it sort of looks like a document, right? And this is actually a real-time collaborative editor, so I can start working in it right away without having to do anything. In this case, I can create new paragraphs right away, and if there were other people in this tool, they would be able to see this in real time. And if I can also start collaborating right away if I just tag somebody, check this out. It sort of acts like a document, right? So relatively simple.
But is this already Trace.Space platform? Yes.
Yes, we are in Trace.Space, exactly. And then, but actually, so it's if you think of Trace.Space, you can think of something that is sort of like a mix of Jira, Notion, and Airtable on steroids. So it's a very easy to use tool, but at the same time, it has a lot of engineering ingenuity in the architecture that lets you track everything. So if you look at on the left-hand side, we have something we call it the project or explorer tree. And so this is how we structure information. We have a sample project here, for example, it's a NASA drone. So it's split into chapters. And if you open any of these, you can see that actually all of these here are individual items. So individual requirements. And so what that means is that if I go here, for example, I can see that every change I'm making is actually versioned in time. So I created an item, then I wrote the title, and then eventually I wrote the description. So, and which means that every change, every action is versioned in time. And it also saves full audit history of what comments there were and all of that. relevant stuff for engineering, and you can like review things in things like table mode and then what's another interesting thing about this is that let's open some functional requirements here. We also integrate different types of AI deeply into the architecture. For example, we have something we call quality checks, which is an NLP-based AI, so deterministic natural language processing,
Yeah.
which analyzes in the Grammarly style the quality of your linguistic writing.
Mm-hmm.
It means that the engineers, as they write requirements, the system suggests using correct language that's unambiguous, and there are standards for that, so that other people reading it can actually then be clear about what exactly is being written. And if we navigate, yeah,
If we take this example from Ford, so for example,
yeah,
let's imagine that, so like why they need to use the software Trace.Space for Ford, and like what exactly they do,
mm,
like they do with the software.
yeah. So in a large scale manufacturing,
Mm-hmm.
you don't do anything in isolation. So in-house, you can think of products as something that, let's say, a marketing team or a product team or a leadership team decides they want to go into a new market and make I don't know, a new roadster for something specific type of specific type of customer. What is happening then is actually you start writing down things. Okay, so what kind of roadster this should be, and those are called like voice of the customer or market requirements, so high level. But then as you break them down, you go into more and more specific details about what exactly these functions will do, features will do. So all the way down to exact design parameters or variables on how what will be your pressure in the let's say braking system, and what kind of signal is going to be sent from to do emergency braking, and how that which pin it's going to connect to, and so on. So actually it goes into like the smallest details, and that is only in-house. But all these large manufacturers have hundreds of suppliers. So you have to not only communicate these specifications internally, you have to actually communicate those specifications externally. So you have to send them to your suppliers. They need to actually to read, understand the specification, and match what they can do with what you are doing. And so what you're requiring. And so what happens is that there is just so much information exchange in emails, PDFs, specific file formats, meetings. How do you get all these complex products together, which are now have also a lot of software integrated? And that's why you need to write down specifications in this space. It's too complex without writing down. And so if you don't, what will happen is that you'll have teams working in silos on different things, and eventually you'll try to integrate the product together. It will be already late to market, and it will not work, and it will fail, and maybe even kill somebody. So you won't be able to certify it. So it's actually a discipline that's extremely important. It's just hidden from the regular eye,
Yeah, yeah.
and all of the products are built like that.
So because for like I could imagine like for a small feature you have thousands of requirements, especially in the hardware space. And so, and now with this like Trace.Space, let's say if Ford wants to build a new car or a new feature, so do you have this database that they can have the draft of first initial requirements, and then they can add more requirements based on what they do, or how they're?
So we don't provide the data,
Mhm.
but they do already have the data. in their existing systems from their previous models. So we just let them use the data in a better way.
Okay.
I can make you a very simple example here, but let's say here you have working on some features for a bread cutter, an electric bread cutter. It's just a silly example, but now with AI, we can say write 10 requirements based on the current document. And so what will happen now is that our system will read this document, look and use the architecture of what is a requirement and how should you write the requirement, and start providing you suggestions on what you can write. So here, and so it makes you faster because you don't have to invent a title, you don't have to invent a rationale, you don't have to worry about writing in a specific format. Our system does it for the engineer. They just have to approve it. And now when they just added these two to this document, if I look, and it also, it applied the correct domain. And so it also starts suggesting other items in the system that might be relevant. And here we just have sample data, but it makes the whole work of engineers much better because they can now immediately see, are there any dependencies already in the system that they should worry about, and notify other teams. And so that sort of it's an AI augmented graph of information. So you not only find the explicit links, but also links that you didn't think about. So it breaks down silos between different teams.
And it's also like saves a lot of time, because if you do this like manually, it's a lot of work. And especially
Yes.
like you're not building one hardware or software, like you're building thousands of them, and then there's so many things to actually taking care of.
Yes, you have to think of it as a contract in engineering, or let's say in law. You have a document that has clauses, and those clauses need to be approved by different business teams, lawyer teams. But in engineering, a specification is a document with millions of clauses that need to be approved by the hardware, software, electrical, mechanical, by product teams, by law, even like legal, for example, the regulation teams that need to make sure that your specification is right. And so that's actually very, very complex to do at such scale where things are just moving so fast compared to how they used to be in the past. So
And like, is it possible for like different stakeholders, meaning the legal department, the engineers, and finance, to have this like collaborative environment which everyone sees specifically what requirements they have to take care of?
yeah, that's exactly what we are doing. Is instead of the reason why we're building the system so easy to access, and even our pricing model is built around usage so that everyone can get involved. So right now, what happens is that only specific engineering disciplines use this tool, and the rest are just avoiding it or don't have access. But what we are bringing is the business and software and product and hardware teams together into one place, and of course also the regulators and all of that other. So it's a tool where we let everyone have access, but also everyone can find information. So we built features, for example, finding requirements in a natural language, like here you can find, but you can also search whatever you want in natural language. So here I'm first searching something called impact, but it also provides me with semantic search. And so makes it much easier for people to interact with the tool. And those are things that were not previously possible. Indeed, we want everyone to be involved.
And like, what type of, or what are those softwares which you want to kind of kick them out of the market and then like replace it by Trace.Space?
The main incumbent is still a tool called IBM Doors.
Okay.
And it's actually a tool built in the late and became popular in the 90s. But most of automotive, most of aerospace, and most of industrial, like large scale mobility, like trains, are still built on this tool that's just like really, really bad. It slows people down. It has terrible UI, UX, no API, and no AI, of course. And so even though, companies don't want to admit it, it is slowing Western manufacturing down. They need new approaches, modern tools, rethink their processes, because otherwise we're gonna lose to China, who are moving much faster with much less process.
Are we done with the demo or something else to show?
No, I
Okay.
think well, there's more to show, but it's a very engineering specific.
Very technical.
I think that's a good overview.
So, like moving to the cells, like you mentioned that it's a very old school space, and also I assume that it's super hard to get to them because these are big manufacturing companies, and they really don't have time for testing, every day one new tool. So my question is that how do you approach in terms of cells, and like what are these like practical steps or like practical learnings that you can share with other like founders who do this enterprise? But I think also this is a very special enterprise because this is longer than other enterprise cells, I assume.
Yeah, so actually, it's the advice to other founders from the perspective of our learnings is that you just need to choose one go-to-market motion at the beginning. So it depends on who your ICP is and what your buyer is like, but you have to choose one and focus on it. In our case, it's large companies that have enterprise sales cycle and procurement teams and pilots. And so we are not even thinking of anything else. We know that our buyers, technical buyers, are going to technical conferences. So we have to be in those conferences. Our leaders, our basically economic buyers, they are looking for ways to make their R&D process more efficient so that they can compete, but they want to meet face to face. So it's a lot of very specific kind of things that we do is we go to conferences and introduce the practitioners with what we do, and we organize executive events face to face, mainly now in Bay Area, but also eventually all over the world, where we invite the leaders of R&D in different disciplines to just meet us the roundtable discussion, or we do a presentation or an event where we invite some guest speakers. But this is a lot of relationship building and trust building in person, and so that would be my advice. You just need to know who your buyers are and what their way of buying is, and then focus on building your go-to-market motion around that. And in our case, it's enterprise sales, long sales cycles. There's going to be a pilot after we show the tool. So we need to have a solutions architect. So, and to start the sales cycle, we need to meet them face to face. So it's actually makes it much more simple if we choose one and then focus on getting better at that one type of process.
And how much time do you give to one customer or like one potential lead to materialize, meaning that it should be converting to a free or paid pilot or actual payment?
So usually it's if you think of a sales cycle, it's you meet someone who are in the market for looking at something, and you should always remember there's always only every given month there's only slice of the total available market that are looking for something. So that, and then you start the process. There is usually a couple of demos until you get to a trial. After the trial, they realize that, okay, this is a tool that's relevant and good. And then you go into a usually up to 2 month pilot. And you need to have a solutions architect in place that actually can be deployed with the customer to help build out the configuration. And after the pilot is done, then there's a long back and forth, and from start to finish, it takes about a year to sell. And so it's typical, but at the same time, the ACVs are much higher, the deal size is much higher, the retention is very high, because once the decision is made, the customers are rolling the tool out for years, and they're not switching out for no reason. So as long as you deliver value and build with the customer based on their feedback and listen to what they need, this is actually a very viable business, because it's not going to shift quickly.
Yeah, it's very sticky, like product. So once they accept it, then it's going to be there forever. And I think that's the same thing happening is that with the IBM, they just get lazier. So they didn't want to switch to a new tool unless, something big is happening or you really are super convincing. So in terms of pilot and the first sales, how did you guys secure your first pilot or first customer? And yeah, what was the procedure with them?
Well, in the early days, it's always a little different. You go through your own network and you just look for wherever you can. Cold outbound, you just reach out to people. But what you do is you don't sell, you just ask for feedback. And what will happen is that eventually you will find people that are very early adopters. It's a specific type of persona or a specific type of human that wants to help early, and they become your design partners. So, and then you build the product based on their feedback, or you're very closely engaged. So you even show them designs and Figmas before you have anything built. And if you are executing that well, you're actually building it for a real pain. And eventually they will want to have that product. Not only because they helped you, because they actually want to solve their problem that you helped them solve. And then, but you always have to be mindful that it is a very specific kind of person that is an early adopter. So over time, that will change, and you'll have to also change your approach. And so eventually you will become much more, in our case, a sales-led organization, but you still have to keep that focus on solving the customer pain.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not going to be some early enthusiastic adopter that pulls you in. It's going to be much harder in some ways.
Can you drop some names, like who were the ones that you did pilot, because they were quite interesting companies?
Well, the one that I can talk about or mention is the logo that we have on our website. Is a company called Bugatti Rimac. They make electric hypercars, and they also make electrical components for other electric cars, so for batteries. And so we've been closely engaged with some of their team in the early days. But overall, this is a type of discipline where the customers are not very willing to share their name publicly on who are they working with, because they also think of their own process as a competitive advantage. But we will be able to share some names eventually. It's just a matter of time. You need to prove value, build out case studies, and build the relationships. But let's say for this type of industry that we are going into, we are 2 years in, and actually these are just very early days. Engineering tools really take time to build.
And I know, I can assume that majority of your client base are in the US. So, and you're an European founder or European startup. So, is there a bit of disadvantage in terms of sales that you're based in Europe, or you're actually building it from Europe?
Well, they say that the holy grail is to have a go-to-market team in US and an engineering team in Europe. In Europe, we have an amazing engineering talent, so it is also much more efficient because Americans also have an amazing talent, but it's very expensive, and they can leave any time for another opportunity. And so here in Europe, you can build a very, very good core team for product and engineering that will stick with you, and that's actually a very good thing to have, especially early days. And then the way we approach the American go-to-market is that we spend more and more time there. We used to go, let's say, every quarter. Now we go every month to the Bay Area mainly. to learn from the practitioners, organize events, and work with our pilot customers. That's something that, well, in our specific case, I think that's almost the only option. We need to win the R&D in the Bay Area because they are the front runners.
Yeah,
You know,
definitely.
like they always will adopt new things faster, and they always will push the limits. And you know, if you go after large German OEMs who will, you know, think of all the bureaucracy and whether you are a safe company to do business with, it's just you're not gonna have enough time. So you have to get early feedback in US. And that's what we are doing. And from the beginning, we made the decision. And so it is a disadvantage to not know how to sell to Americans, but it's something that, well, you can learn, but also you just have to spend time there and be there physically. And that's exactly what we're doing.
Yeah, exactly. You just have to be there. And for me, I don't know, is it bad or good, but it's a bit sad to see that European companies are really waiting for Americans first to like Americans would like to like try the tool first, and then once they get approved from them, they say, okay, yeah, American clients, and we will also like use it. So I hope that this will change, at least this mindset, because that will give a huge push to European startups that they can actually
Yeah,
sell first locally and then go there.
I totally agree with you, but I think that the things will change only after we truly face an existential crisis. And that's coming for Europe. You can
Yeah,
feel it in the air, and there will be large disruption, and there will be change, and it's probably not going to be very pleasant for a while, but overall, eventually, companies and businesses and people and mindsets change when you face existential threats. And so I believe in Europe, but there will be some pain that we'll
yeah.
have to go through.
I hope that moment was Deepseek, or if there will be a bigger moment, then that's really not good.
I would, you know, what's my let's say prediction after doing this for a while? I
Hmm.
have a feeling that it's looking like potentially some of the Chinese, like BYD or something, will buy a factory in Germany because the unions are not letting the Volkswagen to shut the factory. And so, and there are like the trade wars and tariff wars. And so the Chinese will want to make their cars in Europe. Maybe some like big event like that where like the Chinese are now sort of buying out parts of Volkswagen will be like, well, things are really getting serious now.
Yeah,
Deepseek is a fun thing, but it's only a small sliver of population realize what's
yeah.
going on.
Actually, like 2 weeks ago, I noticed that part of Volvo shareholder are like Chinese companies.
Yeah,
So like at least they're in Sweden. But it's just this technology and innovation race. So everyone who kind of push more and then do the work, they will just win. If you just wait for times to calm down and then you build, then it's just too late. But like moving on to fundraising part, you guys made a very good news once you raised 1.5 million. It was one of the largest pre-seed round, or it was the largest one back then. And what was interesting is that you raised without MVP, which is quite rare in Europe. So
yeah.
how did you raise 1.5 million without an MVP? And I think it was just one pager, or like even no DAX. So tell us, what was the story?
Well, our one of our lead investors, Finn Murphy from Nebular, he said that our deck was the ugliest he's ever seen. He didn't say the worst; he just said the ugliest. But yeah, so well, I mean, especially at the early stages, there are only two things that investors can look at. The main thing is the team, right? And so I think we do have a solid founding team. We have all had some decent careers already in tech behind us, but also we are not yet sort of past the prime. So it's only we're coming up still. And so you have some experience, you still have energy and passion, and you have what's called founder market fit. And so we have relevant backgrounds. So I think that's very crucial for investors, especially to see that there is a good team that's tackling a problem that is relevant to them. The other part is there are other ways to prove traction. So in our case, we had a proof of concept of the architecture. So we knew technically we can build what we can build. So we had that, which is also something that you can say here is a proof of concept that our architecture is something that's suitable for this type of product. And that gives you confidence. And maybe also the investor can feel that confidence that these guys, okay, so they actually not, not gonna start only after they get money. They actually have done something. And the other part is we actually did tens of interviews with potential users, and we all recorded them and analyzed them. And so our potential buyer was telling us without prompting that they have a problem in this discipline, in this space. And so you have to have a very good story and a strong team. Attraction is something that it's good to have, but it's at the early stages is less important than the size of the problem that you have to have. And that's the other thing is like, is your problem that you're solving venture scale problem? Can it be a $10 billion outcome? And so those are the two things that I think really matter is the team and the size of the problem. I was just reading that Figma raised Series A without a product still, without customers.
Yeah.
So it's, but you just have to get progressively better at storytelling as a founder if you wanna raise without traction.
Yeah, that's something I think. Yeah, like regarding the team, I think that was one of the investments which was truly based on the team ability, and the like founding team structure, and that's a big plus to you guys. But just I remember the question now, out of curiosity, is that would you do this project if you couldn't raise the round and then just do it self financing still?
This specific, no, because this is not a tool you can build without capital. So it's either you are a second-time founder, exited, but the level of product that you need to build to even start competing needs significant amount of capital. So for this specific, like you can't expect to solve a $10 billion problem for an enterprise with a small proof of concept somewhere. It just needs upfront capital. And it is also something for founders to think about. It's actually not that easy, this road where you have to build upfront. So it's nicer to have some traction, some engagement, some customers, some like this, responding to their feedback, solving some small little problem at the beginning and growing based on that. This is head to head. Like you just have to go build things for years before they actually become real. And that's, it's not easy. It's a tough road, but, that also means less people are doing it. So we call it boring and complex. There's less competition for funds, or other people are not doing it. And so, everyone wants to like make a nice little AI marketing tool, but there's also like a million other founders trying to do that. And only few people in the world are crazy enough to try to revive Western manufacturing with a new engineering tool.
Yeah, yeah. I see like where you guys are going, and I think it's a very big goal, which is inspiring, and that's what makes the storytelling good. I remember that you guys had issue of communicating this storytelling or just like explaining the tools to investors, like to like journalists, VCs, because it's hard for people to get this tool. If you're not from technical background, if you're not in the space, then it's super hard to get it. And just speaking of more money, you guys just raised a new round. So can you tell us a bit about that? Just like how much and how was that experience for you guys?
Yeah. So this is not at the time of us speaking. This is not yet public, but it will probably be public once it's released, once this podcast is released. But yes, we did raise a seed round. We raised $4 million from Cherry, and with existing investors participating, Robert from Fiedler, Finn from Nebular, Andres from Change, and also one new investor, one of the new funds here in Riga. It's Outlast Fund. So it's quite exciting. We've raised now a significant amount of capital for the early days. In our case, it's still early days because of the size of the problem that we're tackling. But that will definitely bring us to a fully commercialized product and help us solve some really big problems for companies in the world. And so I'm extremely excited, also very grateful for this opportunity and to continue doing this. Just regarding the round, I would say that what really mattered, so we sort of thought about fundraising 3 times in the past year, and every time we just felt like we just don't have that, let's say, story right. There's something not flowing. We were confused about what kind of companies we will sell into, like the go-to market. What is it, mid-market? Is it enterprise sales? And when we really sort of sat down seriously a few weeks ago to think about what do we actually do and whom are we doing it for, we sort of really aligned a logical story on, so this is the type of companies we sell into, these are the ACVs, this is the go-to-market motion, this is the marketing motion, this is what we need to do in the product, and this is the type of people we need to hire. So once we sort of aligned on what is our exact plan, without we could do this and a little bit of this and that, once we really focused on how we're going to do this and how we're going to be the best in the world at specific things, that's when the story started clicking. And then we then also officially launched the fundraise when we felt that we got the story right, because we know we can do it. We know the problem is there, but you need to be able to tell it to investors especially. And so once we did that, we felt like even in the informal introductions with VCs that you do just to catch up from time to time, we felt like the interest was brewing. And so that's when we launched the fundraise, and then I mean, it was fast. It took a little more than a week from start to finish. But also, I think it's just the right way to do it. We need to go back, focusing, building for our customer, and fundraisers are extremely demanding, time-wise, energy-wise, focus-wise, and so let's say it took us a month to prepare for that 2-week fundraise. So it's like you can was it easy? Sort of, it felt easy, but actually there was just so much pain before. And
I think like from the VC side, there's a saying that you have to do your homework before fundraising. And I think what you explained, this 2 months or 1.5 months that you guys also sat down, talk about the storytelling is strategy. I think if you do all these steps, then things are much faster, because sometimes VCs are, if you don't get the storytelling yourself as a founder, then how can you imagine a VC can get the story? So I think that if you do this all homework, then it should be much faster, especially now that, there is all this notion of actually you have to be fast in decision making, and you have to be just all these quick processes. Just my last question in this part is that how did you guys come up with 4 as a number to raise? Like, did you guys, kind of did some calculations of like how much to actually raise and why you came up to 4 as the amount?
The way we thought about it is that we know that the fundraising environment right now is still quite tough for everyone. And we also looked at our pre-seed and we thought, well, we cannot go, and ask for like 5 on 25 because it just wouldn't make sense. There is a problem that needs to be solved, but we haven't solved it yet. So we don't have that undeniable traction yet. But at the same time, we know there is a problem, and we know that solving that problem will be a big outcome. And so what we asked in the fundraising process was actually for 3, but because it was a competitive process, it ended up to be 4. And also, I think the VCs, when they look at the problem and how to solve it, and we were very aligned with Cherry that it's a hard problem. They know they have industrial LP base in Germany, so they know how hard it is to solve problems for them. But they also understood that the USA market is where we need to win first. And so the 3 is the fundraise, what we wanted, but actually that alignment with Cherry on how hard it is going to be to solve this problem, and that the US is a first focus, meant that they also gave some extra capital because of those 2 reasons.
Yeah, I think that also increases the chance of winning, because if you raise less money and then you could, I mean, it's hard to raise a bridge round, and then there's lots of doubt and all these things. So like you shouldn't raise more because of nothing, but if you really have a tough market to tackle, you just like should go for it, because like raise doesn't make sense at all.
Well, in our space, I would say that overall, I'm not a big fan of like oversized rounds because you have valuations that are very hard to grow into. But in our case, it's just that even like if you think about it logically, it doesn't make sense that you can solve a large problem for an enterprise for very little money. So you have to have capital up front. And so yes, this is type of market and type of motion that we are going for. It's not for everybody, but it is a logical outcome in our case. If you can solve a problem with less capital and so get traction, that's actually
Let's do it.
amazing. But overall, you have to align on what you're going after.
Yeah. So we arrived to our last part that I asked random questions and then you give your opinion. But we can start with Trace first. Is that if we sit down for another episode in 5 years from now, so where do you see Trace.Space then?
I love this question because first I would like the Trace.Space to be seen as a company that reignited the R&D for Western manufacturing, for all the old industrial R&D companies that were sort of stagnating, that it really lit some fire in their R&D departments to just start really focusing on building better products. But overall, it's something that what I want to see is Trace.Space competing against the legacy, against the IBMs, the PTCs, the Dassault. So we are a sort of an up and coming future engineering platform, and we're growing fast into this huge market, which is engineering software, which is I think it's hundreds of billions are being spent on engineering software. If you think of enterprise, and there's so much to do. It's so much outdated stuff in there in ERP, in bill of materials, BOM, in PLM, product lifecycle management, in manufacturing side and design side, in simulation modeling side. And it's just it's full of fragmented old software, and Dassault and PTC and IBM only innovating in some parts, but mainly extracting capital out of enterprises without caring about the future. So I want to compete in that space. I want to have the future engineering tool, and I want to have a $10 billion outcome, not a few $100 million outcome.
Something that I notice is that because of AI and this new era is that actually all organizations, even the government, for example, now if you look at the US, they're reconsidering what type of softwares they want to use. I think this is one of the unique times which all the companies, even these big manufacturing companies, they question whether they should stick with IBM or not, because they are just like, there's a big FOMO of new solutions, AI, and all this competitiveness. I think there is a huge room for new softwares to actually compete, because now the doors are open, and then they kind of reconsider all their budgeting, all the softwares, and this is just a golden time, I think.
There is definitely an opportunity, and I agree with you. They are opening up their sort of software chains, but you still need to solve a real problem in this space. So it's for enterprise, they're not gonna buy a little toy just to like play around with. They will evaluate properly, and they will, if you solve a problem for them, you should solve it in sort of end to end. And that's really frustrating. But at the same time, once you solve it, you have a huge technical defensibility, because anybody trying to do the same thing has to go through years of building the product and then also learning how to sell for this specific type of industry and market and customer. And so, yeah, so it is a VC case, but it's one of those that you need to be patient.
Yeah, it's a golden one, but it's very competitive. So you really have to
Yeah.
solve an actual problem. And also, like, sorry for coughing, allowed me as well, because it's really cold in Riga. So it's just
Yeah,
very cold.
I'm watching, there's a blizzard outside now.
So my next question is that, what has been your biggest aha moment since launching Trace.Space?
I would say that, the founder grind,
Mm-hmm.
that crazy thing that people always talk about, how hard it is to be a founder. You just sort of think, yeah, whatever, at the beginning. But once you are sort of deep into it, it questions everything, who you are mentally, professionally, personally, physically. It's a much deeper experience than people think. And it's just kind of it's not for everyone, but it's also something that you only can really learn once you go through it. And I would say that the aha moment is appreciation for founders that have reached product market fit, that have built great teams, and especially appreciation for founders that keep doing this, either multiple time founders and successful ones, or founders that kept building their companies, further and further and further. First example that comes to mind is Des Traynor from Intercom. But also, Mark Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs, with returning, actually like doing that, what they did is so hard to like continuously stay engaged in your business, in your company, in your market, as you go through stages of growth.
Mm-hmm.
You just have newfound appreciation for these people.
Yeah, and every stage requires different type of mindset and skills, so you have to adjust
Exactly.
your thinking with that. I mean, you guys are three co-founders, so, and you're the CEO. Do you feel that because you have the CEO title, there's a bit of extra pressure or responsibilities on you, as you're also the leader of this three people group? Or not really?
It's funny that it's not explicit, and it's not also thing you think about on a daily basis. But it is actually, there is a responsibility of being CEO, because eventually you try to do everything through consensus, well, not everything through, it's not the right word to think about it like that. You discuss things, and you try to make the best decision you can. It's not about consensus in this case, but some extra responsibility will always be like, okay, like CEO has to take care of this. So so there is always that little underlying thing where, founders are all in. They all go through this.
Yeah.
But some like formalities, some little public speaking thing, there's always some little extra thing that if there's nobody else who just things that have to be done, eventually can fall under the responsibility of the CEO. It's kind of strange. It's hard to explain
Yeah.
how it feels, but there is something, even though the titles at our stage still don't matter. But for example, a way to think about would be that if you are with a customer, they will be like, okay, you are the CEO, so what's the decision? And even though it can be other people, other founders in the room, they'll be like, you have to always remember like that you have to be mindful of that. Like you have to be inspiring confidence.
I mean, from my little experience, what I noticed is that all co-founders need to be proactive, but I feel that the CEO co-founder type of people are a bit more proactive than others because the kind of you have to really make sure that things are still going on the whole process, and because the other co-founders are a bit like reactive, even if they have full responsibility in terms of building the product and all these things. So I just saw that there's a bit of proactiveness a bit on the side of CEO because they feel that they have to hold everything up because
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, exactly right. That's exactly what I'm saying is that you have to inspire confidence, inspire confidence in the team, inspire confidence in the investors, inspire confidence in the customers. And so eventually, that's why you have to be proactive because you are the one that will be looked upon, even though it doesn't matter the role or the title. But still, you have to remember that there's a responsibility that you have to make sure that people believe in your vision, in the company, in your product, and so on.
Great. Is there a question that you wish to answer that I didn't ask you, or some last comments for the founders, or about anything that you like to talk?
Yeah, it's a good question. We actually had a pretty solid conversation. I think in a way that we um, covered not only the market and the product, but also some of the things that are happening. Did you ask what would I do differently? Yeah, yeah. But did you ask me about what would I do differently if I
Yeah,
had to
yeah,
start over?
yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think you should ask that. What would I do differently?
Okay, so like, what would you do differently if you wouldn't become a founder?
No, I mean, I meant like in this space, but I would say faster. You have like you have to be obsessed with being fast. And so I know we're building for enterprise and all of that, it's much heavier or the vibe in the overall that the sort of the way customers respond. But in anything you do in this space, just that would be sort of one thing that I would think about if I had to do this all over again, um, the last 2 years or maybe even longer period. You have to find a balance with your mental health and speed. So it's like you have to find a rhythm that's actually quite fast. And I'm not saying we have been slow. I think we've built and done a lot in 2 years for what we do. But I think Americans, when you look at the Bay Area, they push harder, and that's one thing that in Europe you have this sort of a little bit
Chill
sort of
vibe.
chill vibe, and it's just in the continent, so everywhere you go. But we have large geopolitical issues in the whole world right now, and Europe especially. And for example, how the bureaucrats in European Union will respond to the challenges that they have to be fast, and so this whole continent has to be fast, and so that's what I would think like inspire being fast everywhere. That would be something that I would think about more, and only now when we are really facing this sort of staring down the abyss at the moment, I would be like, okay, maybe we should be a bit faster
Yeah,
as a
because
continent.
yeah, as a constant, because it's a very like difficult race, and like if you just
Mm,
like if you're behind, then everything is. I mean, not everything
yeah.
is over, but it's a bit hard to pick up, the line back because it's just too far from others. Thank you so much for doing this, Janis. It was really nice, great to have you here.
Yeah, amazing. Good conversation. Thanks for your time, and hopefully we'll be here again. Cheers.
Yeah. In 5 years, hopefully, or so.
Yeah.